Hi, I'm Thomas Bowles, Prince William County Agricultural Extension Agent. Welcome to our video.
Good morning, everyone. It's 11 o'clock and we're going to get started with this week's class. This week's class is on hydroponics, some simple options for the beginner. This is the second of our hydroponic series. Just a reminder, if you could put your questions in the chat box as we go along, we'll answer those at the end. So let's get started. So last time we talked about, what is hydroponics, and it's basically growing plants without soil. It's usually done in greenhouse situations, but it can be done at home with grow lights. And technically it can be done outside as well. There are lots of advantages and disadvantages to growing hydroponically. Generally speaking, with hydroponics, we get higher yields. We get a cleaner product. We can do it in a small space. We have more control. The disadvantage, though, is that there's more management involved. And depending on what system you're doing, the technical learning curve can be pretty steep. And the capital investment can be pretty steep, depending on what type of system you decide to go with. Today, we're going to focus on more low-tech ways to get into hydroponics, to figure out if this is something you really want to do without the big investment. So hydroponics has closed systems and then it has open systems, and the open or drain to waste systems are probably our least efficient when we're talking about hydroponics and water. It's the most labor intensive. The picture here is cherry tomatoes being grown in grow bags, and it's being fed by drip irrigation. You can see with the arrows, the main line comes here, sprout goes in there, and then all the water drains out the bottom of the bag. It's a pretty complex system, but it can be done at home. And in fact, many of you are probably doing it at home already. The simplest drain to waste system is container gardening, because you're using nutrients and water and you're applying it to a plant growing in a media and the water's not recovered. So if you're growing in pots, you're already doing hydroponics. You've made the first step. But again, this is kind of labor intensive and it's not an efficient use of water. Another way to get started in hydroponics is to deal with sprouts and microgreens. It's important, if you're doing this, though, to use seeds that are produced for sprouting. There are a couple of diseases that may be on seeds that you just get. The seeds produced for sprouting are sterilized. The other ones may not be. And never use a treated seed. Most of the time, treated seeds are seeds that have an antifungal on them. So if we look at the difference between sprouts and microgreens, sprouts are the first stage of development of a plant, and it's harvested at a few days to about when they get their first true leaves. And you can eat the entire plant. Microgreens are the second stage of development, and we harvest about 1 to 2 weeks after they get their true leaves. Sprouts are really simple. You need a tray or a jar. You need some cheesecloth and a rubber band that you can put around the neck of your jar to hold the cheesecloth, and a drainage rack. And then you're rinsing daily, getting these seeds to sprout. Microgreens, on the other hand, are a little more complex because it needs some sort of growing media. Most of the time we're talking about using a shallow tray with a grow light. You're watering from the bottom. In this particular system, you don't want to eat the roots. You only eat the shoots and leaves. When we're harvesting microgreens, we're using clean scissors, and then we discard or compost the roots and the growth media. There are lots of things that are commonly used for microgreens, depending on what your pleasure is. Some of these you wouldn't think of. I certainly didn't think of sunflower until somebody brought sunflower microgreens to a meeting I was at. They're quite good, actually. But there are lots of different varieties to choose from, and they're a good, nutritious addition to salads, or you could just eat them. The next kind of simple step is a non-circulating deep water system, which is sometimes referred to as the Kratky method, which is named after a University of Hawaii Extension professor. In smaller home systems, it's usually a fill it and forget it in terms of having to deal with nutrients and water, and I'll show you why in a minute. You can use containers that have lids or that have styrofoam floats that cover the entire surface area of the top of the container you're using. This allows for deeper roots, and if you're going to reuse them, you should sterilize them with a mild bleach solution in between uses. So how does this work? Well, depending on the plant, you might need a growth support, but you've got a net cut into the lid. You've got some sort of growing media in that net pot. You've got a container that's got nutrient solution in it. So this is the basic setup. Then what makes this nice for the home grower is that you start with a full bucket of nutrient solution, and as time goes by, that bucket slowly empties as the plant starts to grow. And so by the time that you're ready to harvest, you should have very little nutrient solution left. What this does is it allows the roots to continue growing and stay moist and not dry out. And it really is simple. There's not a whole lot of reason to fool with it other than, checking on the plant itself. So I'm going to show you a video about how you can set up a simple bucket system like that. Hannah Wooten in Florida has done this demonstration, and so let me change what I'm sharing. Okay, let's try this.
Hydroponics can be a great, easy, and affordable way to grow your own food. Today, I'm going to show you how you can grow great-looking lettuce just like this hydroponically at your own home. All you have to do is set it and forget it. The first step for growing your hydroponic lettuce is going to be starting your seeds. Here, we're going to be using these Oasis grow cubes to get these seeds started. You're going to start by soaking those grow cubes in water and getting them completely saturated, just like this. Once your grow cubes are completely saturated, you can remove them and prepare them for planting with seeds. Today, we're going to be using green butter bib lettuce. These are pelleted lettuce seeds, which just makes handling a little bit easier. And with fresh seeds, you can just place one seed per cube. But if your seeds are a little bit older, it might be a good idea to place 2 per hole. Now that we've planted our seeds, they're going to be ready to germinate. So you're going to put them back into a container. We're going to reduce the amount of water in that container because we don't want the seeds to be completely flooded, but we do want them to have some water and some high humidity in there. So you can place those seeds in the container, cover it to keep that humidity high, and we're going to wait about 2 to 3 weeks while these seeds turn into little baby seedlings, where we will then transplant them into our buckets. While your seeds are in germination, you're going to have a little bit of prep to do. So right now, we are going to drill some holes in our 5-gallon bucket. We are using a power drill with a 2-inch hole saw drill bit to drill out the holes in the lid of our bucket. We're going to be drilling out 3 holes today so we can plant 3 heads of lettuce. it's good to stabilize the bucket and stabilize the drill using a little bit of pressure here. Just like that. When your lettuce seedlings are ready, it's going to be time for you to make your nutrient solution. There are going to be a few steps involved in making a proper nutrient solution for your lettuce. First, you're going to fill up your 5-gallon bucket with water, almost to the top, but not quite. You want to leave about an inch of space. That's going to provide the air which is necessary for your lettuce roots to grow successfully. In order to make a proper nutrient solution, we need to add nutrients to the water because that's how the plant can have a healthy, balanced diet. But we also need to balance the pH or the acidity of that nutrient solution so the plants are able to access those essential nutrients. These are some fancy meters that you can buy to measure your pH and the amount of nutrients in your hydroponic solution. But today, I'm going to teach you how to make those measurements with teaspoons and with very affordable pH strips. It's a good idea to go ahead and test the level of your pH first so you know where you're starting. We're going to use these very affordable pH indicator strips where you just put it in the water, lay it to compare the color, and you can see we have a pH of about 7 right now. That's neutral. We want a pH that's in the range of about 5.5 to 6. So now we're going to add our nutrients. The nutrients are going to help to lower the pH a little bit. Then we're going to add our vinegar to drop the pH to our desired range of 5.5 to 6. So we're going to start by adding 5 teaspoons of the nutrients. And now we're going to add 10 teaspoons of the vinegar. This is white distilled vinegar. Now I'm just going to give it a quick stir to evenly distribute the nutrients and that acidic vinegar throughout the solution. Now let's see what our pH looks like. Looks like we're right there between 5 and 6. Now that our nutrient solution has been pH balanced with our nutrients added, it's going to be time for us to place our seedlings, which are now about 2 to 3 weeks old. Now we're going to take that lid that we drilled those 3 holes in with the 2-inch hole saw, and we're going to place it on the top of our bucket. And we are going to take these 2-inch net cups to place in these 2-inch holes. You can see that the water level is up about halfway on these net cups. That's important so that our seedlings can remain in contact with the nutrient solution so that they can get off to a good, healthy start in this bucket. Now we're going to take these seedlings. You can see they're already rooting out here, and we're going to place them right here into our nutrient solution. At this point, your lettuce is going to be ready to set outside in a sunny location in the whatever months are your lettuce growing season. Here in Florida, that's going to be in the fall, the winter, and the beginning of the spring, where your lettuce can grow happily and healthily outside. Your lettuce is going to be growing outside for about another 3, maybe 4 weeks, and then your lettuce is going to look like these examples over here. Now the real trick with the success of set it and forget it lettuce is that those seedlings that you started over here are going to push their little roots right down into the water and nutrients. And while your plant is actively growing and taking up that water and nutrients, that water level is going down. So you really can just set it and forget it. Now your set it and forget it lettuce is going to be ready to harvest. But don't forget to harvest it. I know your lettuce looks very beautiful and it's tempting to want to just show it off to everyone. But now you're going to want to harvest your lettuce so that you can enjoy what you've grown over the last few weeks. So here we're just going to take some scissors. We're going to harvest this whole entire head today, and we're just going to cut at the base of the lettuce plant. We're going to move that lettuce right here to a bowl where it's ready for dressing. I hope you found the set it and forget it hydroponic method to be an easy, affordable, successful, and delicious way to grow your own food. I'm Hannah Wooten with the University of Florida IFAS Extension in Seminole County. If you would like some more information, please feel free to reach out. Thanks and have a great day.
So you can see from Hannah's demonstration, it's a very simple way to get started, and it's fairly easy. It's fairly inexpensive to get into, and this is just one more way to start doing hydroponics. So one other way that you might think about is a wick system. Wick systems are basically, they kind of look like just a regular container, but they have these reservoirs in the bottom. And depending on what type of system you're using, it could have a basket area at the bottom where that's filled with media that allows it to draw up into the potting mix. It may be something like this very simple one that we sometimes use for kids in schools, where you've got wicking material that's in the nutrient solution and it slowly comes up as the plant needs it. There are lots of different ways to do this. The pots are fairly expensive, especially if you buy the larger ones, but it's a simple way to do almost drain to waste, but have a lot less water waste. It's still going to require a little bit of management because you're still going to need to make sure that the water reservoir is at a good level. Sometimes adding an air stone into that reservoir can be helpful, but if you've got your air gap, a lot of times that's not needed. So NFT, or nutrient film technique, is about as complex as we're going to go for today. This is really common in greens productions, and basically you're pumping nutrient solution into the root zone. And plants are either held in tubes or channels, or they're in media beds. And the way it works, and filters aren't necessary in all systems, but the way it works is you've got your reservoir with nutrient solution, gets pumped up. In this case, it's going through pipes that have net cut cups in them and being returned. In the case of a media bed, the water would come up, go through the media bed, and go and return. It's a very simple system schematically, but it can get complex. So if we look at this hydroponic frame, and this is a common way to do hydroponics with NFT, you've got a pump and a reservoir over here in the back. It gets pumped to each of these tubes. The water runs through, comes down, collected in a central channel, goes back into the reservoir and gets pumped up again. As Hannah mentioned, it's important to have the pH right. And when you really get into hydroponics, you're going to want to focus on electroconductivity and pH. And electroconductivity is just a measure of the ions in the water from your inorganic materials, which is your fertilizer and dissolved salts. And pH, as Hannah mentioned, is a determination of how acidic the water is. It's measuring free hydrogen ions in the water, but the important thing is it tells us how acidic or basic the water is. And the ideal varies by species. For example, for cucumbers, your electroconductivity ideal is 2,500. For lettuce, it's only 1,700. But usually you want to keep your electroconductivity between 1,500 and 2,500. And the pH, Hannah had it at 5, but generally 5.5, 6 is probably the sweet spot. But 5.5 to about 6.5 for most plants is where you want to be. If the electroconductivity is off, it means your nutrient solution is too weak and you need to add more nutrient system. If the pH is off, then the plants can't uptake the water or uptake the nutrients in the water. If you go excessively crazy with your electroconductivity, you end up having a salt buildup, and that can harm or kill your plants. That's more of a problem in industrial hydroponics than it is home hydroponics. And when we're thinking about hydroponics, we want to look at suitable seed. You want seed that's recommended for hydroponics or in container growing, which, as we've discovered, is really hydroponics. These are generally short, compact versions of those particular vegetables. Some seed companies will allow you to search for hydroponic varieties or container growing varieties on their website. As Hannah showed you, pelleted seeds are really nice for small seed. And basically what they've done is they've taken the seed and they've coated it in clay. But it's a permeable clay so that the seed gets water and the clay eventually dissolves away. It's really handy for handling those small seeds. I have some examples here of some recommended varieties. There are more than this, but these are just some ones I picked up. And there are lots of varieties and lots of different types of plants that we can grow hydroponically. The easiest is lettuce and other greens. With cucumbers and tomatoes, you're going to need some sort of support system. Eggplant, if you get these compact varieties, generally you don't need a whole lot of support, but you may need some support. But I urge you, do your research and make an intelligent choice. I mean, the last thing you want to do is put the wrong species in and not be able to control it or have it collapse on you. Whoops. So these are just a couple of seed sources. There are lots of different seed sources, but Paramount and Johnny's Select, I know both have hydroponic specific varieties. There are other seed companies that do. These are just two that I know about. And these seed companies can be really helpful. You know, if you're not sure if it's good for hydroponics, you can always call the seed company on their customer service line and get a better understanding of how the plant grows or how that variety grows. When you're choosing your fertilizer or your nutrient solution, you need to do your research ahead of time. Some plants have nutrient needs that change over time. Tomatoes are a good example of that. You know, the companies that sell hydroponic nutrient solution can recommend specific products for the plant you're trying to grow. The less intensive you're producing, the more flexibility you have with the product you choose. There are organic options available, but they don't always cover the needs of every species you're going to grow. So again, it's important to do your research. There's also some food safety considerations that you have to keep in mind. Sprouts are considered a high-risk food for food safety. A lot of that has to do with not using the right seed, the seed that's specifically for sprouting. The other problem is that you have temperature and moisture that is nice for sprouting, but it's also nice for microorganism growth. The seed could be contaminated, as I mentioned. The container can be contaminated. Most of our foodborne illnesses, over 50%, have been traced back to somebody not washing their hands and introducing some sort of pathogen. So just be mindful of that. Also harvest your crops so the solution doesn't splash onto the produce. And cool your harvest promptly, especially if you've got it in a high heat situation. You want to get your produce in a cooler area, and that could just be a tub of water, or that could be taking it inside where it's nice and cool in the air conditioning. So we have some book resources for you. We have lots of online resources for you. Most of these are from our fellow extension folks. This, if you want to see Hannah's video again, this, you can find it on this blog in particular, the Set It and Forget It Hydroponics. Some of these have, these two give you good references for EC and pH. This one from Cornell is good about making a recipe, a nutrient recipe for you. There's way more information than you probably want or need in these, but there's good basic information in there as well. And these are some suppliers that specialize in hydroponics. And lastly, do we have any questions?
So how can you access the links?
We're going to have this on YouTube probably within a day or two, and you can copy the links from there. Also, we can, when we send the evaluation out, we'll also send you a list of links.
Can you go back to the supplier slide, Thomas?
I'm sorry, the which slide?
The supplier slide.
Whoops. There we go.
All right. Can we send that out in an attachment to everyone too?
Yeah, I'll put all of those together on a page and send those out. I'll PDF it so that links are active.
Thomas, one thing people might try is just take your cell phone, flip it around, and take a picture of that screen, and you've got it. You don't have to wait for it.
Good point, Jimmy. Thank you.
We have a couple questions. It says, since you don't use soil with the Kratky, would you have fungus gnats or no? Because they are the bane of my existence, and this is from Jody.
Jody, I understand that. I despise fungus gnats. You shouldn't, because you just have the oasis foam, which is not organic. So it's not going to break down and be a problem. Fungus gnats really shouldn't be a problem unless you already have fungus gnats and they need a place to breed, because they like moist places to breed.
And then Michael had a question. So do you need a grow light to grow indoors?
Yes. The light that we see is inside is not as bright as we think it is. And also, even if you've got your hydroponics set up in a south-facing window, understand that the glazing of your windows, unless you're in a really old house, stops a lot of the energy that's going into your house. So it's not quite as bright. So having grow lights do help. With greens, it's not as necessary if you can get them in a sunny spot in the house, just because they can grow in low light. Herbs are probably the same in terms of they can handle some shade outside, so they would be a little bit better inside.
The next question is, in the 5-gallon container, should you be worried if the water doesn't stay all clear? And what should you add to it?
So theoretically, you shouldn't add anything to it. The water should stay relatively clear. There's going to be a little bit of discoloration because as the plant roots grow, they're going to slough off dead cells. And that's going to get in the water and that will discolor it slightly, but otherwise I wouldn't worry about it.
The next question is the plastic material of the pail a concern for health safety?
Not if it's clean.
That was here was one more. Do you trim the roots of the plants once in a while?
No. You let them grow as much as they want to grow. And as Hannah showed you, those roots can get pretty deep in a bucket system like this, or whoops, where is it? Sorry. Those roots can get pretty deep. They can also get pretty deep in, a system like this because the roots can spread out. One of the things that when you're going from crop to crop, you have to make sure that the tubes get cleaned out to make sure you get any root residue out of there. But no, I wouldn't worry about trimming the roots.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions? There's one. When you cut the lettuce off, will it regrow?
It depends on what type of lettuce it is and how you cut it. For heading varieties, once you cut off the head, you're pretty much done. For the leafy varieties, you can cut off some of the leaves and it will start to regrow. You don't want to cut off all of them because that'll put too much strain on the roots if you're trying to get it to regrow.
Are the LED grow lights as good as others?
Yes. In fact, some people consider them better just because they last a lot longer.
And then for the pail method, Laurel asked, once the lettuce is harvested, you can use it to start over?
Yeah, basically you want to empty it out, clean it out with a 2% bleach solution, and then you're ready to start again. And if you really want to have, succession, Hannah had 3 holes in this, so you plant one week, and then the next week you plant the second of the 3 holes, and then the following week you plant the third of the 3 holes, and that way that will give you 3 weeks of lettuce to harvest.
Thomas, as far as those buckets, 5-gallon buckets are concerned, I'd be concerned about that. I think they ought to be a food grade bucket. And I understand that the Home Depot and the Lowe's buckets are food grade, but I would caution people not to just use any old 5-gallon bucket. You don't want to take an old paint bucket and rinse it out and try to use that for a hydroponic operation.
That's a good point, Jimmy.
Definitely.
Yeah, you want to get something that is, start with something that is clean. That's high quality. An old paint bucket is going to leave residue, even if you think you've got it clean. And especially you don't want to use a bucket where you've been storing chemicals in it, whether it's lawn fertilizer or what have you.
Thomas, the other thing I thought was important was, I put in the chat is, I get a little impatient. I don't want to start these seeds. I'm ready to go now. I'm fired up about planting the garden and getting some of this additional stuff started. And so I think you can buy plants already started from some of the nurseries or some of the big hardware stores, and just kind of rinse off the bottom of it, get most of the soil off the seeds, and start with a plant that's already started. And the other thing we did, I tried to set up over at the Boys and Girls Club, was instead of buying that Oasis foam pad, I got some pool noodles and cut off a pool noodle and trimmed it up a little bit and used it to help support the plant in those little cups. And that worked out extremely well for me, and cheaper.
That's true. Pool noodles work very well. Your other point, Jimmy, was buying up plants that are already started. The only thing I would caution folks about buying plants that have already been started is that there's a difference between the roots that grow in the soil and the roots that grow in water. And so there might be a little bit of transplant shock, but otherwise clean the roots off and you can plug them into this type of situation. If you're using a media bed, then you can just stick them in the media bed and it won't be a big deal. Although in that case, you'll need a filter to protect your pump.
Thomas, there's one more question. Susan asked, where can we get the nutrients?
So you can get them in Home Depot or Lowe's or places like that. In the hardware stores, some of them sell, and it's a limited amount of nutrient solutions. Some of them actually sell that. But I would look for a supplier that specializes in hydroponics, and which are any of these. I've worked with Hydrofarm before. They're really good, and FarmTech's really good. And I haven't worked with any of the others, so I'm not endorsing one over the other.
Also have a question about, can you start plants in hydroponics and then transplant them to soil?
Yes, but again, you need to be careful. The transplant shot going from water to soil, if I'm remembering correctly, is a little bit greater than going from soil to water. You also want to make sure that when you're doing that transplanting, you're really careful because the roots are a lot more delicate than soil roots. And you're going to, like I said, you're going to see some transplant shock, but you can probably do it. I would not do it beyond the cube stage. You know, I would start stuff in hydroponics, and that's, you know, that's really simple. Start them in a cube or a pool noodle or what have you. I wouldn't go to like the bucket system to start a plant. You've already started it in a cube. It's easy enough to plant that little plug outside. Because the bigger the plant is, the more delicate the water roots are and the more used to water the plant is. You take them out of that and put them into soil that's going to dry out. That won't be very good for the plant.
And Jimmy mentioned that if you start them like that, they might have to be hardened off before you put them in the soil.
Yeah, depending on if you're doing it early in the season or not. Depends on how you would harden it off. But basically, I would suggest, especially if you're doing greens, start them in the shade, because you really don't want to hit them with a lot of direct sun when they're first going outside.
That was the last of them, Thomas. Last of the questions.
Okay. I want to do a quick plug for those of you in the greater Prince William area. If you're having issues with your lawn, we have a Best Lawns program where we can come out and have a master gardener measure and sample your soil, and you'll get a custom report based on the size of your lawn. It will also give you information on how to deal with pests in the lawn. So if you're interested in that, contact Natalie Walker. She's our Best Lawns coordinator. And beyond that, thank you all very much. Next week, we're going to have shade plants as our featured topic.
And the link for registration for that is posted on our website. PwC, let's see, we're changing over to websites on Friday, and it will be pwcva.gov. The current website is pwcgov.org/grow. Or you can send a request to the Master Gardener desk at mastergardener@pwcgov.org.
Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.